Hey folks, so this is a video basically describing what I mentioned at the end of a previous one about the 3 points in, I guess, a philosophy I've been cultivating as of late. Um, in that video, I made the case for a more organic philosophy, one that attempts to appreciate the more holistic, nonlinear systems and sort of see how they connect everything and sort of put our put our place in perspective of a greater picture. And I think the emergence of bigger pictures are going to be more important in this century because they're going to help us see our place and balance ourselves more. Because without a bigger picture, if we're too fragmented, we're not going to be able to move together to solve so many of the problems. And we have so many problems in this century that need to be addressed together. Um, I guess that's sort of the encouragement speech. But really, it comes down to, as I mentioned, 3 points, and I guess I'll go into them in more detail in this video. Uh, the first is acknowledging a more organic reality. That is, the mechanistic view of the universe is perhaps too simplistic for a world which is very, very nonlinear, um, very curvy and relational and holistic and interdependent. So a world that seems to be messy and chaotic seems to create order out of chaos. And this may not make as much sense in linear processes, linear thinking, and I think that's why science up until lately has been a very gradual sort of thing. And I mentioned this in my last video. Science, as it has been very fragmented, piece by piece by piece, top-down analysis, breaking things apart. But what needs to be complemented by that is a bottom-up um, observation of relational processes, the points between two two perspectives, two objects, two objects in reality have a relational dynamic. So this interdependence is really important to acknowledge, particularly in nature, with any kind of science that is studying biology and ecosystems, um, and even the more civilizational address sciences studying, energy and sustainability are acknowledging now that things are so complex, and they're complex because they're so nonlinear. They're not mechanical. They're messy. They're organic. They're interdependent. And when you think you have a process figured out, you suddenly figure out there's something else behind it. So we're missing the thing that brings everything to life. We have the basic diagram of reality, but we don't have the living systems that interact and engage each other. So an organic philosophy is needed, I think, um, particularly in in our culture as a whole. I think planetarily speaking, we need to embrace more organic, worldly, holistic systems in order to understand our place, in order to engage the problems that we're having right now in the world. So that's one. Organic philosophy is so necessary. Um, and I don't mean to say that commandingly. I believe that this is very important. Um, and two, we can understand processes better if we acknowledge, if we have this interdependence, the places between the objects, the relational dynamics, um, and the multitude of variables that are in this, individual systems have an emergent property. They have synergy. So this synergy means anything that appears to be a thing in itself is actually made up of all little things. And this is actually a very Buddhist concept, the law of, interdependence. So anything that appears to be a thing in itself, any whole, is made up of so many parts, so many interdependent parts, and they create, a layered emergent reality that is always evolving and in flux. So particularly speaking, it's in flux, and the way the dynamics work, which we hopefully will understand more in this century, is that there is an emergent complexity in them. Um, So I found that to be very interesting. Uh, so this emergence of these dynamic systems, the synergy that where these parts become a new whole, is best understood through a holonic system of reality, a system that acknowledges whole parts. And if you're not familiar with Koestler's holon, basically it's in this idea. It's an idea, just as I described, that a whole multitude of interdependent nonlinear parts create a new whole. For instance, a galaxy made up of billions of planets and star systems. So this and together they create a new order of relation and new laws and new dynamics that perhaps are at the border of chaos and order. They're an organic order. They're not a mechanistic order. Um, so we have these emerging layers of holons. We have a whole holistic reality, which is different, I think, than hierarchy. Um, and so I think we can use holarchy, and Wilber mentions this a lot, and this is one of my favorite things that I get from Wilber, and that he presents this um, holarchical view of the universe, in which things are always emerging, evolving, and interdependent. But within any whole, you'll see a whole bunch of interdependent parts. So anybody who really says, "Look, this is the this is all we need to be looking at," we can apply this uh, nonlinear organic thinking, this holonic thinking, to that and say, is it really? Are we mistaking up the parts for a whole or the whole for the parts? Because when we do, we don't understand the emergent nature of the phenomenology of existence. For instance, if somebody tells you, you only need to study um, physics to understand the universe, well, that's not necessarily true. Um, But it depends. If you're saying the physical universe, then yes, that has a place. But once again, this sort of thinking displaces that perspective. It says, all right, it puts that perspective um, in perspective. So and this organic thinking, to summarize it, not to get too complex, enables us really to reflect on what we're thinking about. It's a way so that we can, our consciousness can, as Teilhard might say, fold in upon itself, reflect, and thereby differentiate and evolve. Um, and that's always the case in evolution. It's always differentiation, and in our case, emerging complexity. So I applied this in an earlier video to the last video to science, because science up until this point has been very fragmented and hasn't been able to acknowledge more nonlinear systems as being relevant. But I think hopefully in this century we will acknowledge their extreme relevancy in order to describe any process, including um, human dynamics, social dynamics, biological, evolution, for instance. I think is going to learn a lot from these interdependent, these holonic systems, these organic perspectives, um, and I'm sure physics will too, in a vastly complex way. And this is going to be really complex in that manner too, because all this involves very messy um, nonlinear mathematics, and that needs, well, for instance, as Manuel de Landa says, this creates the demand for um, exponential and multiplicative thinking, not linear additional thinking. So I think that's a good way to put it. It gets messy and it gets complicated very fast. But if we have the right philosophies, as I've been saying, one an organic perspective to an emergent synergistic point of view. Wholes are made up of parts, interdependence, um, and three, a holonic system of emerging orders of complexity. Then we can better understand our universe and ourselves. So I guess I will leave off there, and thanks for listening. Please, comments are more than welcome.